So, today we're going to talk about the really major things that you need to know in order to deeply recognize a dismissive avoidant attachment style. And I'm not just going to give you the top like 8 or 9 things to pay attention to. I'm actually going to give you all of the in depth pieces so that you won't get this wrong. You'll be able to be on a first date, second date, ask the right questions, and really have each profile of each attachment style dialed in if you watch this. And then, of course, the other parts of the series where we discuss the other attachment styles. So, what we're going to talk about first, just briefly, is we're going to talk about the difference between traditional attachment theory and integrated attachment theory. And then I'm going to use the major components of integrated attachment theory to help you dive a little bit deeper and recognize the components of a dismissive avoidant as a whole. So, traditional attachment theory was developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. And they went through things like the strange situation experiment and did a tremendous amount of work on understanding attachment styles as a whole and really looped in each attachment style with their temperament. Now, what I found when I first came across a lot of this work, well, I guess it was when I later came across a lot of this work, but I found that there wasn't a lot of direction about how to deeply heal an attachment style and how it implicated us at the subconscious level of mind. And so what was really interesting to me is back in 2013, 2014, I was running my client-based practice and had a really busy practice and had learned about attachment theory in my undergrad, but hadn't really ever dove deep. And I was working with clients specifically around their different core wounds and their different needs and learning to communicate their needs and regulate their emotions and set better boundaries and make sure they were in a position where they could update their coping mechanisms or behaviors. Because everybody has sort of like their thing that they do when they're coping. And it can be to cling too much or to push people away, or it can be to binge eat food or like, whatever coping behaviors we have. And so, as working, I found that these 6 major things had a massive impact on individuals. And then what blew my mind is after 2 years of doing that work, seeing like 30, sometimes even 40 clients a week, I went back and revisited attachment theory from a deeper perspective and was like, oh my goodness, each of these attachment styles has these unique 6 things that I've been talking about. And in fact, when we incorporate, because you're not born with an attachment style, it gets conditioned into you at a young age through repetitive things you're exposed to, right? So you have repetition and emotion, which is part of how we get conditioned. And I learned that, oh my gosh, we can recondition these things. And I was working on those things with other individuals, with clients. And so, for example, you'll see that dismissive avoidants have core wounds around feeling defective, afraid of being trapped or helpless or powerless or weak, or shamed, right? That defectiveness, shame core wound, if they are too vulnerable. Whereas anxious preoccupieds, for example, have core wounds around feeling abandoned, afraid of being alone, disliked, rejected, not good enough. And there's other ones as well, but you'll see how each attachment style has the unique core wounds, unique needs, unique emotional patterns that they tend to experience, and they're different across all 4 different attachment styles. So, and then we go on to behaviors, boundaries, and communication patterns. So, what we created and what we actually published and copyrighted at the beginning of 2019 was Gibson Integrated Attachment Theory, which takes those traditional attachment styles and actually plugs them into those 6 components and then overlaps that with the subconscious mind. And through doing that, we can go a lot deeper into recognizing attachment styles and a lot deeper into healing attachment styles. So, what we found at PDS is that over 90% of individuals, if they were able to give, and I know it's a commitment, but if they could give 4 hours a week for 90 days, and of course, there will be outliers to this, right? It's over 90% of people we polled and who reported this. But we found that if we could give 4 hours a week of doing these courses, all about how to recondition your core wounds, learn to meet your own needs, learn to communicate your needs better to other people and receive them, learn to emotionally regulate, learn to set better boundaries, upgrade your coping behaviors, and applying all these tools at the subconscious level of mind. What we found is that over 90% of people reported becoming predominantly securely attached within those 90 days. And so Really digging in here and doing this work is really profound because we can recondition our attachment style doing this. And so this is the body of Gibson Integrated Attachment Theory, and it's part of what you hear so much on this channel. Now, anyways, what I'm going to do is use those findings and these tools, and I'm going to help you just start by understanding the different patterns that we'll see deeply of a dismissive avoidant attachment style overall. So some of the major things that you will see when it comes to the core wounds, right? That first major branch of integrated attachment theory is I am defective. In other words, something's wrong with me. It's really the shame wound, I like to refer to it as, like the emotional output of this wound being triggered is shame. But you'll see specifically for dismissive avoidance, it's things like if they get criticized, it's not like, oh, I'm being criticized for what I did. It's like for who I am. They take it very deeply, very personally. Dismissive avoidants get very hurt by criticism. They'll stonewall a lot of the time. They won't show their emotions, but they are feeling them and often reeling from them. A core wound of being unsafe, afraid of being trapped or helpless or powerless, especially if they rely on other people, or a core wound of being seen as weak if they are too vulnerable, right? So these big fears of relying on people, being vulnerable, these sorts of dynamics. If a big core wound for dismissive avoidance as well is this idea that I'm like not capable of change. And it can be not good enough is what it's related to, but they often will communicate it as I can't change. I can't do anything differently in the relationship. They feel kind of stuck as they are. So these are the big core wounds that you'll see for dismissive avoidance. And again, like you'll see, for example, anxious preoccupieds, just to juxtapose it so you can see their core wounds are things like being abandoned, alone, unsafe as well. They do share, but it's like unsafe if they don't have proximity and closeness to others. Being rejected, disliked, being in a place where they are seen as bad or excluded, so you'll see a lot of these different core wounds, and you can see how interestingly they fit to each attachment style, although they're completely different. The major emotional tendencies of the dismissive avoidant attachment style, they will often feel shame. They feel shame quite frequently. And shame is an emotion that makes us want to push people away and hide, right? So it's part of why dismissive avoidants deactivate. They tend to deactivate and push people away when they feel ashamed. They experience low level anxiety, irritation, impatience, frustration. They can feel numb, drained, annoyed, overwhelmed. These are the more emotional tendency of DAs. And you'll see, for example, by comparison, anxious preoccupieds, I mean, what are their emotional tendencies? Like loneliness, anxiety, worry, panic, feelings of desperation, right? So you'll see very unique emotional patterns. The major needs you'll see for dismissive avoidance, they really need to feel like they can have their autonomy, their freedom, their independence. They want to feel appreciated, acknowledged. They want to feel a sense of harmony, peace, time to decompress, certainty, stability, and safety. And so, again, you'll see these dynamics according to dismissive avoidance as a whole, right? And you'll see totally different needs for an anxious preoccupied. The relationship to boundaries. Dismissal avoidants often set really large boundaries because, believe it or not, they struggle to set small boundaries. So, dismissal avoidance will do things like say, I'm not coming over at all, instead of say, oh, I'd love to come over, but I'm feeling a little tired this week. Can we just watch a movie instead of go out somewhere? Like they don't know how to communicate their boundaries or preferences to people in sort of like in detail, right? So they'll just set big boundaries like I'm not coming, or they won't show up, or they won't answer messages, because not only do they do that, but they tend to communicate in terms of their communication patterns much more through their actions rather than their words. Whereas you'll see a lot of the other attachment styles, they'll communicate more through their words than through their actions. And they can both personalize that form of communication with each other. So, for example, you'll see fearful avoidance, they can be really critical with their words. And they won't take it that personally if other people are critical with them. They tend to be more like, oh, the person's just mad. They're just in a bad mood. But they will be really hurt and often offended if somebody just ghosts them, doesn't answer, pushes them away, stonewalls them, like communicates through their actions. They can personalize. Whereas it's flipped for dismissive avoidance. They will communicate a lot more through their actions. And if somebody else communicates through actions, like ghosts them, doesn't show up, doesn't text back, they really don't take that very personally. Whereas if somebody communicates through words, if a fearful avoidant is very critical towards a dismissive avoidant, that will be taken very, very to heart by the DA. So you'll see a lot of these different dynamics Um, so we've got this relationship to boundaries. They won't set small boundaries. They're really good at setting large boundaries and just saying no, hard no. And I call this our survival boundaries. Like I feel like dismissive avoidants are good at setting boundaries around things that make them feel safe, comfortable, a sense of security. But then when it comes to their intimacy boundaries with people, their boundaries around connection as a whole, they can really struggle there to be, to find that gray area essentially. And by the way, if you want to do a deep dive into this stuff, there's a course for all of this. So when you go into PDS, and you can check it out for free for 7 days and see if it's a good fit for you, but we have like a whole 90-day challenge running. So you can go in, you can take these courses, the emotional mastery course, the needs course, the emotional regulation course, all about somatic processing. You can dive into the communication course, the boundaries course, and the breaking bad habits course. It's all about self-sabotage, procrastination. And it will help you recondition each of these things at the subconscious level of mind, which is where these patterns exist. And this is how we become secure fast. And this is how we're dealing with the root cause. So you can use the 7-day trial below, go in based on your attachment style and dig into it from there. Now, the last two things I'll say here are we've got our common behavioral coping mechanisms. So we have the coping mechanisms for DAs are to withdraw, to decompress, to stonewall, to ignore, to dismiss, to be passively aggressive at times because they're not very great or feeling comfortable with communicating directly, to numb, to avoid, and to use creature comforts and deactivating strategies. Okay, this is how the DA copes. Creature comforts can be things like binge eating, binge playing video games, binge watching television, like these things that they're kind of like disconnecting from their sense of self around. And you'll also see that DAs can often get their needs met in like this imaginative, kind of lightly dissociative state where they'll go into their imagination rather than thinking they can get their needs met directly. So I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. In other words, you can be trained to become a relationship coach certified in integrated attachment theory in literally 60 days. So who's this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the integrated attachment theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. Now, please keep in mind that the last 2 times we ran this program, we filled up very fast. In fact, we oversold the programs and sold out completely. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me. And I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out. And last but not least, major communication patterns. You'll see that, as I mentioned earlier, DAs communicate through their actions more than language or words. They'll communicate very indirectly, sometimes passive aggressively. They will avoid conflict. And you'll see them communicate again through a lot of those deactivating strategies, through stonewalling, things of that nature. So these are some really powerful ways to recognize a dismissive avoidant attachment style according to our copyrighted body of work all about integrated attachment theory and really digging much deeper into the subconscious and these patterns. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this makes so much sense. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in future videos.